Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me Daniel Stafford and Robby Switzer. We had them here not too long ago, and their story of as digital marketers at Shopanova is a fabulous story. But their story was so interesting, and the backstory behind it was also fascinating. And I thought it's just too rich for us not to go back and have that story to share, because I think so many of us right now are struggling. What's coming next? It's that uncertainty. And they have a story of perseverance, of overcoming, of dealing with, I think, a life experience that none of us will ever want to have, but lessons that they're willing to share with us. So Robby and Daniel, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to just let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us back. We're excited to dive more into our story. We love talking about this stuff and hope it inspires your audience today.
Yeah. So just to kick us off, if you rewind, about 6 years ago from today, you'll find two young guys in a small town called Homer, Alaska. There's about 5,000 people, both kind of starting their adulthood journey, trying to figure out how to do something meaningful. Like most people watching this show, we kind of had this entrepreneurial bug, wanted to go out, make money, wanted to do something with purpose, and wanted to have impact. And so naturally, we knew exactly how to do that because it had been modeled for us time and time again. You take on an ungodly amount of debt, you go and you buy a commercial fishing operation, and then you leave, you say goodbye to your family and leave for months at a time and go work up to 20, 21 hours a day catching fish, and you make money. And then in the off season, you do construction. And it's just, it's very entrepreneurial, but it's very much tied to manual labor. And the people here are just a different breed. It takes a very burly person. There's men and women that do it. And that was kind of us. We both launched into our life as our careers, in this way. And Daniel, you actually had a much more intimate history with what that looked like because you grew up in a commercial fishing family.
Yeah. So my my grandpa commercial fished, my dad grew up doing it. And then the first time I went out on the boat, I was 3 years old, which is crazy looking back because you know how 3-year-olds are now on boats. It's like they're always near the edge and like you're always worried they're going to fall over. But running a commercial fishing boat while having a 3-year-old on there must have been crazy. So that's what the first time I went out, then, I'd just go out for a few weeks at a time at that point. And then, I think by the time I was 10, I was actually a full crewman, meaning that was my full-time job in the summertime, stacking the net and bringing fish in, delivering the fish, all the things that it entails. But it was super fun at that age because it just felt like a big, long summer adventure. I was able to sport fish off the boat as well. There's all this marine wildlife around. You see lots of whales and birds and just a really cool experience out there. And then a lot of lessons too that I've learned came from fishing, like hard work, perseverance, optimism, which is a lot of things that my dad actually passed on to me that served me now. But it was really fun growing up all the way up into the point until I got married. And then I was like, man, it's just not the same now.
Really quick, just to interrupt you too, like right before you got married, like it was such a cool setup for you because I remember, just being your friend and you kind of had this history and your dad, he's super successful.
Yeah.
The local legend here, basically he holds the world record herring set. So his dad's like a local legend and he was obviously getting a crew share of that catch. And so at 18 years old, he was this really cool guy who he went and built his first house, as an 18-year-old, kind of living this awesome bachelor life where you go out and you make a ton of money. And then, some construction in the off season, but also tons of freedom there as well, where We could go traveling. Fun. We did like some surfing trips overseas, stuff like that. And so it was really, really cool for a season of our life. But, then we both kind of started really figuring out what it meant to be responsible adults.
Yeah, totally. So like I said, I got married when I was 23. And once I got married, I was like, man, I gotta make a decision. I either got to buy my own boat and do this, for my family now and create our own business, or keep being a deckhand, which I didn't see wanting to do that long term. So me and my wife decided, okay, let's dive into this. Let's buy a boat. And it's crazy because our operation costed us around $300,000. And most of that was borrowed money. I pulled equity out of my house and just went all into fishing, and really stressful time because it was a project boat. We had had to put a lot more money into it, just went deeper into debt before the season. And most fishermen do that. And they're go into a lot of debt before the season, and then you just hope the fish show up for the summer. And sometimes there's a run failure and they don't show up and you have a really hard year. But I was fully banking on, a good run. And then on top of that, the markets really control the price. So you don't even know what you're getting paid for them before you just go out and fish. And they're like, oh, okay, we're paying you this much per pound. So it was a pretty big risk, but went all in and went out. And am I skipping anything?
Well,
here?
Just another layer of risk that I would mention is, so there is no guarantee that fish will show up. There's no guarantee that you're even going to get paid a fair price. But then on top of that, it's a very competitive environment, and there's no guarantee you're going to be able to outmaneuver another boat to catch the fish. Yeah, it's not like everybody goes out and equally splits the catch and gets the same paycheck. It's one person's going to catch 80% of the catch for that day, and the rest are going to be floundering. And so it's very competitive and very risky. And it's just funny from a business perspective now. It feels like that's so risky, but that's what we grew up around, and that's what was normal. Wow. But the tables definitely did turn for you.
So we went out and had a really good start to the season. It was me and three other guys, 3 deckhands. We went out and it came natural to me, right? Because I grew up doing it, and we were catching a lot of fish, having a great start to the season. And then one day we were heading back to the Port of Valdez because my wife had actually just drove into town to visit me, and she's 9 months pregnant at this point. We're just about to have our first child. So she came out and she actually got on my dad's boat, and he was running out to where I was to drop her off. And as we were heading back into town, the wind started picking up really quickly, and the waves were hitting the stern of the boat, meaning the back of the boat. And we started kind of surfing down the waves a little bit, and it didn't feel too sketchy or anything. They weren't huge waves, but all of a sudden a big one hit us, and we surfed down the face of it and came down. And a lot of times when that happens in a big boat, when you hit the bottom of the wave, it turns sharp over once you surf to the bottom. That's what happened. We turned hard to the right, and I just looked, and the front rail of the boat was dipping under. And this is a big 45-foot boat. We're all in the cabin. We had 10,000 pounds of fish on board, and we all locked eyes for a minute, and we're like, oh, we're not recovering from this. And so at that moment, it was every man for himself to get out of the boat as it capsized. So it was one swift motion surfing down the wave, and it just turned over. And I was on the uphill side, so I opened up the window and climbed out. As the boat was rolling, I was actually able to walk across the top and onto the bottom and stay dry the whole time, luckily, because I had my cell phone in my pocket and we were close enough to town to where I'd service. So I immediately it all happened fast. I was standing on the bottom of the boat now because it was upside down, still floating there. And I called my dad, and he was about a mile away, and I was like, hey, Dad, I just rolled my boat. And so he jumped in the skiff, which is a smaller boat, and started coming our way as fast as he could. And then in the meantime, we were waiting for the crew to pop. I was waiting for the rest of the crew to pop up, and 2 guys came up, and it seemed like forever. We all started yelling, Pat, Pat. And that was a third guy that was still underwater, trapped in the boat. And we're all, we thought he was gone. It seemed like forever, it was probably only a minute or two, but when it's that traumatic situation, it seemed like it was lasting forever. And finally, thank God, Pat did pop up, and we're all able to get on the bottom of the boat. and we were all safe. My dad came, grabbed us, took us away, and then someone, salvage company came and dealt with the boat. But in that moment, I just felt like such a big failure. Like I just spent all this money on this boat. I shouldn't have rolled it. I just lost my business, lost all our personal items. All of a sudden, like we had nothing on us. All our clothes were soaked. We had to drive into town and literally like rent a hotel room and buy all new clothes because none of us had anything. But, it was so stressful. My wife was pregnant. We were about to give birth. She was like a week away from her due date. And so this all just compiled and happened at once. And that's kind of what set me on a full new trajectory.
So this all happened in your first year of business, of your own business.
Yes, first year of business. Okay. Of my own business. Yeah. And the first year of my marriage.
Yeah. Welcome to adulthood, Daniel.
Yeah. Right.
No, so then so I had a similar path going. I didn't roll my boat, but did take on about the same amount of debt. And I got married, I think a couple years before you, actually, to Daniel's little sister. So it's kind of like, we all know what's going on. We were in a similar fishing area, but doing different fisheries. And I had actually already had my first child. And I remember there was one night, where it was toward the end of the season. I had been out for I think going on 4 months. And, and during that time, hadn't really seen my wife and my new daughter all that much. And at the time, I had this realization that, my daughter was 7 months old and I had been gone for 4 of those. And it just clicked in my head that I just didn't really want to do that for the rest of my life. And again, like Daniel, there was a time where this was super, super awesome. Me and my wife actually fished on the same boat. For the first year of us buying our operation, it was super awesome. And we also did really well because Brittany, she grew up on the fishery as well. And she worked on her dad's boat as a full-time deckhand and would go and make all this money, and had kind of that same experience with Daniel, but also had a deep understanding of how fish move, where they were going to show up, and how we could catch them. And so that was really cool. And we did pretty well, and it was this fun adventure. But then again, once we kind of shifted from, being young and a little bit reckless and really able to take on a lot of risks, we both started having kids and we were married, and we kind of just both realized this wasn't really going to work out long term. And it was hard because we felt trapped. We didn't really know what else to do. But I remember the defining moment for me. It was toward the end of the season. I was just sick of being out there. The weather was awful. It was dark out. They're pounding on the boat. I had a much smaller boat. It was like a 30-foot boat. And I looked off across in the distance, and there's this old man who's also just getting slapped around. And you could see his light out there, and it's pouring down rain. And he's out on his deck in his rain gear, and he's just picking through the net, pulling out fish. And he has a bottle of something stiff right next to him. And he's operating this boat and self-medicating. I'm like, is that really where I want to be? In 30 years from now or 40 years from now, just out here, slapping the net out all alone and all this stuff. And it felt like a very dramatic moment. I think there probably would have been ways for us to live fulfilling lives and be happy even if we stayed in commercial fishing forever. But I think we both had these experiences where we got to figure something out. And so we were friends during that time. Yeah. Also brother-in-laws. And I think Daniel, he started reading books.
Yeah. And I want to say too, after I rolled my boat, lost everything. Insurance covered part of it, but I'd put so much money into it and stuff. At the end of the season, after all the hard work, everything we went through, we ended up in about $50,000 in debt. And at the end of that, I just had to go, and my son was born right during all that. Yeah. I just had to go back and work construction just to float by for a while.
Well, when your son was born, you only were there with him for a couple of days.
Yeah. I was only there for 4 days.
Fishing, right?
Yeah. I had to go finish out the fishing season on a different boat that we ended up leasing just to try to recover some of it. And then got back, and my wife, had a really hard time with me gone with this newborn. lost a lot of sleep, and she actually went into like postpartum psychosis just from not sleeping, which was another whole crazy experience that was super traumatic on top of the trauma I just gone through. So super wild season. I had to come back and just work construction, making $20 an hour, which isn't enough to pay back $50,000 in debt, right? That'd take a long time. And so I started, I think too, I was going to deckhand with my dad in the off season just to try to start paying back stuff. But like Robby said, I started getting into some entrepreneurial books. And I think one of the ones that really shifted my perspective and mindset was the book Think and Grow Rich, where I realized like, like making money, all these things is actually starts with the mindset. And once you have the right mindset around it, you can start attracting these experiences into your own life. And before that, I thought, wealthy people, they're just lucky, or, they have something that I'll never have. But when I read that book, it totally shifted my perspective. And I started thinking about things much differently. And I was like, dude, Rob, you got to check this book out. And he got it. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, we kind of both went through it and basically came out of it with this belief that we could do something different. And we didn't necessarily know where to start. And, we had committed ourselves to an entirely different line of work. So there was no education or experience in anything other than commercial fishing and construction. But we did have a passion when we were out on the boat. We loved making videos. We always had a camera with us, and we loved just making like digital art and videos. Yeah. And we're like, well, hey, let's just start a company and see if anybody needs video work, and we'll get into corporate video. And we kind of started this video production, and it was really it led us on down this path of like, what can we do to help a business grow? Because we'd make these videos and then they wouldn't necessarily know what to do with it. They're like, well, should I post it on Facebook or Instagram or on my website? And we're like, yeah, I mean, that's great. And they'd pay us a pretty good budget for this video. And then we'd get feedback. Well, like I did it, but nothing's happening. I love the video. And so, really wanting to make this a valuable asset for that business led us toward trying to answer that question. How do you use a marketing asset to grow a business? And that led us into digital advertising, which is what we do now. And we've niched down to e-commerce businesses alone. And so, like you said, it's really valuable for people to hear that it's not all rainbows and roses, in the beginning of a business. We struggled for, many years in commercial fishing, with ups and downs there. But then, even when we started our digital marketing agency, the whole first year felt like a failure to us. But we went in it. We had so many lessons. We were celebrating little wins. We were celebrating momentum, and we knew there was something special and different about what we were doing now. And we were super grateful that it allowed us the ability to, in some sense, put our lives back in order and really pursue things that were meaningful for us, which was, being around our family. We had very rigid guidelines around how we went about this new company, because we didn't want to take a toxic lifestyle and then transplant it into something new. So we're like, hey, we're not going to work past, we're going to do 9 to 5. And we set all these very strict boundaries. And it's really anti-cultural, because a lot of people in startups, they feel like they need to give absolutely everything they can to get it up off the ground. And I think that's true, but it looks a lot different sometimes. And for us, it was actually putting restrictions on how much time we were doing in the business, which again, just led to more efficiency. It led to developing standard operating procedures, and it made us have such focused time. And when we were there, we'd hit it hard. And, I know we're kind of diving into the backstory, but I'm going to breeze over a little bit of a pretty big period of time here, because we were kind of in a cycle for a while where we were just getting by, selling videos and just learning and kind of doing this learning. And then eventually we kind of started to learn how to do advertising and selling these packages and validating them. And we just started slowly, year after year, building momentum. And now, I guess 6 years later, we have 44 full-time employees. Wow. We've generated our e-commerce clients over $100 million in revenue directly attributed to the campaigns we run. And when we sit back and we reflect on this, we're like, this is amazing. Like, how in the world did two young guys with this background go and create that much resource for other businesses that can now use that to, pursue their dreams, pursue a meaningful vision, employ people, serve their customers by the nature of their products. I think that's one thing that I really have learned to love about business is that when you're thriving and you're doing well in business, transacting makes the world better, whether that's, even selling a garment that's, going to make somebody's life better in a certain way, and you're doing it in an ethical way. Every time we transact, we're adding value into each other's lives. And that was the idea that we just latched onto, and we kind of got a high anytime there would be a win, and we just kept rolling with it. And there were many, many more tough stories in those foundational years, but it's so fun now to be in this place where we now have a chief operating officer who's basically taken over all of the daily operations of the business. And we're now in this, we share this visionary role of CEO, and we've had to reinvent ourselves year after year. And we're just so excited for this next chapter of what that means for us in growing our company. And it's really fun reflecting on the beginning stages of that all. And I know we breezed over quite a bit. It's hard to pack, 6 years into 20 or 30 minutes here, but and
I want to say too, when we oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you finish and then I'll ask.
Okay, cool. I was just going to say, once we shifted though our mindset and what we thought was possible for ourselves, it all of a sudden became very fun to work hard in the business, because we knew we were building something long-term and sustainable for us and our families, and something that we could see ourselves thriving in long-term. And so changing our perspective was super helpful. And I just want to inspire people that do feel stuck, that may have lost their job during COVID, is that's not the end of the road. That experience can actually serve you. I think life happens for us and not to us. And so maybe the biggest blessing someone received was losing their job, and they can actually now go pursue their dreams. And it's not going to be just like Robby said, a road of rainbows and roses the whole time. Maybe there's some challenges and hard parts, but just to keep your long-term vision and your focus there really helps smooth out all the trials along the way.
So for you, advice that you would give somebody, and I want to put this in the context, when people get to a hard time or at the end of their career and they're looking at what's next, they kind of fall into sort of the same crisis. Often marriages by then have fallen apart. Children have fallen apart. Mm-hmm. Health has fallen apart. And people are often self-medicating. So there's something that your mindset shifted, but there's something that also propelled you forward. What was that? What sustained you during this period of time so that you could say, yep, got a shift, but there was something that held you up and kept moving you forward?
Mm-hmm. I can take a stab at what I would think that would be. So one of our core values internally as a company is we feel we are designed to thrive, both on a professional level and on a personal level. And it's in the very nature of who we are to flourish and grow. And I think what's tough for business owners, when you feel the weightiness of responsibility and risk, and when things aren't going super well, they want to put all their focus into solving that problem. And we try to compartmentalize our professional life and our personal life. And naturally, one will starve if there's crisis in either or, and you don't have a proper balance between the two. I think what has been extremely helpful for us is that, this whole journey was just as much about us putting our lives in order and becoming healthy and whole people as it was growing a business. And I truly feel that has given us the strength and the courage to be able to weather the storm. And then even as leaders, for that to be a part of our vision for our people, we've actually surrounded our people with a similar sentiment where when somebody comes to work with us, we're holding them accountable to thriving personally and professionally. And so work is actually making their lives better. It's actually making the world better, and it's helping make our clients' lives better. And so I feel like it's really easy to submit to the pressure and give it absolutely everything you can, but you need to have a much bigger awareness and a much bigger value for actually, why you're doing what you're doing, and not just sacrificing everything for the sake of making a little bit of money. And to me, that being rooted in thriving both personally and professionally has just given us perspective, perseverance, strength, courage, like all these things that have helped us stay grounded when things do get tough and when things get good. Because we've seen a lot of people who have overnight success and it destroys their life. And we've just been so grateful, and that seems to be working for us. So that's what I would offer as my advice to somebody.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add to that, and it's such a great question, is I feel like mine almost taps into the spiritual side a little bit. So for me, it's God. I just feel this deeper calling to do something great, to serve other people. A lot of people would call that the universe. Whatever that is for you, I think there's something so much deeper that we're able to tap into that really does propel us into our calling and propel us into the person that we are created to be. So that's something I'm always able to get rooted and grounded back into.
I have one more question for you. You are brother-in-laws and you are partners. How have you sustained your relationship? Because partners have trouble when they're not related. And when you compound it with family, it can sometimes be overpowering. So how have you managed that? And how have you've made some very conscious choices, I think. And what are those?
Yeah, I'll start, Rob, since you always start. Go for it. So for us, I think it feels weird even saying this, but we're both super rooted in humility. So neither of us are ever trying to take credit for the success of the business. We're always sharing it with each other and with the team and giving each other and the team credit, which I think has been super helpful. But one of the main things too is just open communication and feedback without getting offended. Mm-hmm. So we're able to have very open conversations with each other, and we have a connection now where we know it's rooted from a place of love and wanting to help each other, not trying to tear each other down. So we're able to give each other feedback if we need to, but just open communication has been super helpful. And we actually speak with someone once a week that facilitates. It almost sounds like a marriage counselor for business, but we speak to someone once a week that actually helps us facilitate these conversations, just to make sure nothing's getting swept under the rug. Mm-hmm. And also having outside perspective of saying, okay, this could be an issue if you guys don't address it. So that's something we place a high value on is having a mentor.
Yeah, and that's a huge theme for us in our entire journey. Is the only way we're ever able to learn the new skills that we did, get the results we were for our clients, to start to build momentum in the business. We owe a huge debt of gratitude towards mentors and, people who knew things that we didn't. And so we always had this huge value for, not learning by experience, because that's the slowest way to learn, but actually tapping into something that, somebody else has already figured out. And so that was a big theme. And so naturally, our relationship being a big part of this business, we brought in a mentor to that, very early on. And we've been working with the same guy for over 3 years. And like Daniel said, it's painful and embarrassing sometimes to have to be like, because we're both naturally really kind people. And one thing we've been working past is, a tendency to be passive at times. And so it's really easy for us to sweep stuff under the rug and not confront it if we feel like it's going to make a big mess. And we're both pretty easygoing, but we'll sit down there and Justin, who he calls himself a life consultant, but he coaches us in business and our relationships and stuff. And he'll be like, now, Robby, is there anything you need to tell Daniel right now? It's super embarrassing. It's not fun. And, we embrace it with a sense of humor. I think that's what helps us get through.
Thank you so much, Dan and Robby, for being with us today on Building My Legacy podcast. Your story is so powerful, and I know it's going to have an incredible influence on a number of people who have gone through a lot. These last few years, months actually, have been really a struggle for many people, and they're looking at the future and trying to figure out and sort. And your story gives so much hope. And a sense of purpose for beginning to redirect and refocus. So thank you so much for being with us today. And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast, thank you for being with us. We will have information about Robby and Dan in the show notes. Please feel free to contact them, both for their business acumen in digital marketing and e-commerce, as well as just to reach out as another company who has figured out how to overcome and to look at the positives that come from those really difficult times that we face sometimes in life. And Dan and Robby, again, thank you very much for sharing your story. And remember to visit us at buildtomorrow.com with the number 2, and also all of our social media sites. Thank you so much for being with us.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstagard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstagard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.